Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant and good evening to you wherever you may be. This is Comfortably Zoned Radio, and it's time for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. I'm your host, Peter Trunk, and my co-host is Ron Rabinovitz. Hello, Ron.
Hi, Peter. How you doing, buddy?
Okay, how are you? It's good to hear your voice, and you sound like you recovered from your illness and you're ready to go. 100%.
I'm ready to go.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
Whenever
great.
it's talking Dodger baseball, I'm always ready to go.
There you go. I hear you loud and clear. Now,
That's right.
I'm going to let you
Okay.
introduce our guest tonight,
Okay.
and I'm going to let you give the background. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay. All right. Mark Langell is one of the most fascinating people I ever met. If you love Dodger baseball, he's the guy to talk to. I could listen to his stories for hours. The first time I met Mark Langell, he took me on a tour of Dodger Stadium. What a thrill. All the historical things he shared and the stories he told. I came to Dodger Stadium another time with my son and grandson, and he was so gracious and kind and took time out to his busy schedule to show them around the stadium. Mark is the team historian and publishing director. He has written several books about the Dodgers. Mark Langell graduated from the Cal State Northridge in 1988 in journalism. It's our pleasure to have my friend Mark Langell as our special guest tonight. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Ron and Peter. It's a pleasure to be with both of you.
Thank you.
So, tell me what's going on at Dodger Stadium right now these days.
Well, it's just like the movie It Happens Every Spring. We're getting ready for another opening day. I think the only difference is a certain announcer who had been there for 67 years is no longer there, but he still haunts the place because he came by last week for some voiceovers. So it's always good to see Vin Scully, and he's making speeches now in the community, distinguished speakers, and so Vinny is still making appearances. We also have the World Baseball Classic. Right now, USA is scheduled to play Japan. And would you believe this big semifinal game, and they have it in a warm weather city. And right now at the stadium, it's dark clouds, and everybody is looking up the trivia. We haven't had a Dodger home game rained out in 17 years, a streak of 1,400 games exactly. And now suddenly USA and Japan is wondering, all right, is the streak going to be broken with us?
Oh, no.
I hope not. So you've got opening day is what day? Is April
the 3rd, Monday, April the 3rd, and it will be a day game with the Padres. And, you know, coming off of 4 division titles, it's a very exciting time, but we're also looking beyond that because, and I know right up your alley, something very special to you. April the 15th is not only the 70th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's Major League debut, but the first ever statue at Dodger Stadium will be unveiled, and who other should it be than the great Jackie Robinson?
Absolutely. That's such a great honor. That's wonderful. I wish I could be there, but I'll be watching it on TV.
Well, I'll be sure to send the photos, and I also told you, if you can visit this summer, one of Jackie's longtime teammates, Gil Hodges, there'll be a Gil Hodges bobblehead. And how cool will it be to be able to share with the fans that this was the only Brooklyn Dodger player, just imagine from 1890 to 1957, the only one to hit 4 home runs in one game, and that was in Scully's rookie season in 1950 against the Braves at Ebbets Field.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about that. Wow.
Yeah. In that game, Carl Erskine, the pitcher, had 4 hits.
Did he?
Yes, he did. I interviewed Carl Erskine last June. He was telling me about it. He went 4 for 4 in that game, but Gil hit 4 home runs. Let's go back to Mark.
Wow.
Mark, we need more information. We're dying for opening day. We're dying for April 15th. We're dying for a 5th straight Eastern championship, but we want to go further and further and further, as you well know. Please tell us anything and everything you want about this coming season.
Well, I was going to tell you, I don't care if we get in on the back door of the wild card. I don't care if we get special dispensation somehow if we can just get into those playoffs. You're absolutely right, Peter, because the goal is to win the World Series. And I was watching Dancing with the Stars, the spot with David Ross, dancing on that ballroom, the cha-cha, whatever it was. And just to think this was a third-string catcher that was about to be released in 2002 or sold to another team. He just looked like he was at the crossroads. And I think that's what fans always have to remember. You just absolutely never know what's going to happen. The Dodgers seem to have the Cubs under their control, up 2-1. And then look at the World Series. It goes down to a 7th game. So now when you look at this season, you have Kershaw as the ace of the team, and it's fascinating to see sort of the chess moves because with transactions, Julio Urias from Mexico, he may not make the rotation. They may want to wait and see what happens with some of the frontline starters or some of the veterans that might be coming off of injuries. And so you've got that chess match. You've got Logan Forsythe now joining second base with Chase Utley. And so that's a solid combination. You don't necessarily have to rely on the ancient mariner Chase Utley to try to do it again, late in his career. That's asking a lot. It's better that he can just sort of come off the bench and be a clutch player and a great example for the youngsters. Now you've got Seager, the All-American boy at shortstop, and he's got that little lingering back problem in spring training, but he had that last year. But you always want to hold your breath because with a back, no matter how good you are, you're not going to be able to do anything if you don't have your swing. And at first base, you've got the old pro, Adrian Gonzalez. Now, Andre Ethier may not be ready on the opening day roster because of a back injury as far as a disc. Now, they say it's minor, but you just never know with the disc. And so you've got Yasiel Puig and you've got Tolles. They're in the equation as well. And at third base, you've got Justin Turner and Grandal behind the plate. But I always tell people you can't really tell what the season's going to look like coming out of spring training because to me it's broken up into thirds. You have the kumbaya, spring training, everybody try to get together and stay healthy. But then you're going to see separation from the pack and you're going to see who's contenders, who's non-contenders. And you're always going to have that drama at the end of July. What do we do? Let's say we have a little lead. Do we still get rid of some of those prospects and try to go over the top and get just that one extra player that can make the difference? And then if you do make the playoffs, it's a crapshoot, whether it's Kirk Gibson, Don Larson, pick any postseason in history. You can't predict what's going to happen. Snyder, to his dying day, said of all the people to pitch a perfect game, it had to be Don Larson, and he just sort of shook his head. 50-plus years later, he still couldn't believe that Larson had the only perfect game in World Series history. So you really have to be patient because look when the Dodgers were 8 games behind and Kershaw was out, and it looked like the season was over. Yet what happens? The Giants go in the tank, and then the Dodgers get hot. Kershaw comes back, and he actually comes out of the bullpen in Washington for his first career save in Game 5. Now, all these wonderful storylines, it drives you crazy, but that's what you sign up for when you're a baseball fan. So this is the fun stuff. This is work on your tan in Arizona. This is get your tickets ready for opening day. And opening day is the best day because if they lose, you're not crushed. You say, hey, we got 161 more to go. That's fine. You don't have that little optimistic feeling when you go into the playoffs. You just sort of wake up with butterflies in your stomach. Opening day is the one day where you can take off work and you can enjoy yourself. And then it gets a little dicey in the playoffs. I will admit for myself, it's very hard to watch in the playoffs. I'd rather go over to your house and mow your lawn for 2 hours and then you tap me on the shoulder and give me thumbs up or thumbs down. Because it's excruciating with what's at stake. And the worst thing, too, is in the League Championship Series, HR will say, hey, we're going to fly to the American League City. You get your +1, you get your travel. We were on a plane all ready to go to Cleveland. All we had to do was win 2 more games. And so just imagine trying to watch those games knowing what's at stake. It's a lot easier just to sometimes find something else to do for 2 or 3 hours because you suddenly find yourself screaming at the TV and doing things you wouldn't ordinarily do.
That sounds like me. I start screaming.
We've been through it. We've been through it for summer after summer after summer after summer. We've been through the exact same thing.
I'll tell you the last day of the home season when Scully had his last game at Dodger Stadium, it was like an out-of-body experience because I was by myself in the office. and somehow I'm standing up and I'm staring at this guy named Charlie Culberson, who I've never really heard of, and I look at his uniform and I said, "You're wearing Garvey's number, now do something with it." And I might have even hit the side of the filing cabinet. And mind you, nobody else is around. This is not normal behavior. And a couple swings later, suddenly we're all naming our children after Charlie Culberson. So that's funny. You just never know what the heck's going to happen. That's what makes it so crazy, and that's what makes it so fun.
I have to say this, though, Mark. I have to say this, though. When I was watching on television and Culberson was at bat and I saw the number 6, I also said, "Hey, you're number 6. Do something with it." But I didn't say Steve Garvey. I said Carl Furillo.
Carl Furillo.
Absolutely. and we look at these uniforms, and these guys wear it in certain times, and everybody has these flashbacks. I was speaking today with Drew Drysdale, the daughter of Don, and how ironic was it that she would call today, because last night Roz Wyman, the former councilwoman who brought the team to Los Angeles, had called to get tickets for her grandson. And I said, when your grandson goes to Vero Beach this year to visit, see if he can find that spot where you posed with Don Drysdale. Now, what are the odds that his daughter is going to call the very next morning as a UCLA history major and wanting to talk about how a baseball franchise can affect a community? That is the absolute beauty of my job, to not only meet people like Ron Rabinovitz and know the story of Jackie Robinson and the letters, but to continually play, connect the dot, connect the dot, connect the dot. And, Peter, you just told a great story about Carl Furillo, and I read a story this morning that I didn't know, that when Carl Furillo went to Dodger Fantasy Camp in 1985, it was a 30-year reunion. He had finished his estrangement from the Dodgers, and so he came back for the reunion, and driving home to Pennsylvania, he crashed his car and he flipped it. And the EMTs were trying to get him out. Fern, his wife, got out, and they said, "Okay, we got the door clear. You can get out. Hurry, the car's going to catch on fire." And he said, "In a minute." And they're looking at each other like, "What do you mean in a minute? Get out now. It's gonna catch on fire." And it turned out that Carl Furillo had hidden his money under the floor mat, and he wasn't going to leave a potentially burning car without getting his money. And anybody that remembers 1960 when he warred with Buzzy and Walter O'Malley over being paid the balance of his contract, he was released and he thought he was hurt. Here he is, 30 years later, not going to leave a burning car till he gets his money. And so that's the beauty for me, to play connect the dots with this stuff. It's so fun.
Wow. That's a great story, Mark.
It's a great story. Great story. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's really something. Carl Furillo.
Well, what do you think? You've done a nice job, a succinct job, going around the Dodger infield and the catcher and all that stuff, and you touched on Kershaw. Can you tell us a little bit more? Since I live 3,013 miles away in New Jersey, I'm a Brooklyn boy. Can you tell us a little bit about the upcoming season? For instance, the pitching staff after Kershaw and before Kenley Jansen. We all know about Kershaw and Jansen, and we're all very happy about Kershaw and Jansen, but we're not too up to date on what's between these fellows and what's going to happen. Could you improvise, rhapsodize, and grow eloquent about that, please, Mark Andrew?
Absolutely. And then the first thing I thought of, Peter, when you prefaced the question was calm and sane and pray for rain. Because
there you go.
You just can't predict with these guys. You know, last year, Kenta Maeda, they weren't sure about his health, and he turned out to be the ace of the staff in terms of being consistent all year. And so the question, though, is can he, if he's the number 2 starter, I think the big question mark is Rich Hill, because last year Rich Hill was acquired from Oakland, and he went 3-2 with a 1.83 ERA in 6 games. Okay, that's a nice sample, but Rich Hill is a veteran pitcher, and you wonder, did he find the fountain of youth? Was it a fluke? I think the whole rotation may hinge on a guy like Rich Hill, because it reminds me of a Tim Leary. Tim Leary went 3-11 in 1987 when they got him from Milwaukee, He went to Tijuana during the off season, learned a split-fingered fastball, and suddenly he's a 17-game winner, and he has the season of his life. And so I think Kershaw is going to need to have help. Kershaw, they're not going to be able to run him into the ground and pitch him 8-9 innings because of his back. That's just not something you can't burn out your ace, and I think that's why Urias, even though Urias at age 20 could probably start the season in the rotation, I think they want to be cautious and just let him still get accustomed to the majors, maybe be the long man out of the bullpen in certain situations, but I think they probably have an innings count for Urias, maybe 160. Maybe that's an invisible magic number, because if they go to the postseason, they'll still have to pitch him. So
sounds right.
the two comebacks to watch, you've got Kershaw, Maeda, and Hill. So then the question is Scott Kazmir. He'll probably open on the disabled list because not only has he got the aches and pains as far as the elbow and the hip, but the velocity is down. And so you're not necessarily going to rush him if the velocity is down and you've already got a significant investment. Brandon McCarthy is another question mark because signed a big contract last year, veteran pitcher, and it's sort of kind of like the Giants pitcher from the 1980s, on again, off again, Andy McGaffigan, because you just don't know what you're going to get from a McCarthy. So you've also got Hyun-Jin Ryu, who a couple of years ago was one of the ace left-handers in the league, but he's really been inactive the last couple of years. And when they went to the playoffs 3 years ago, Ryu was a big part of that. So Ryu could be a bonus. He kind of reminds me of Hideo Nomo when they brought him back in 2002, and everybody was kind of like, how much is left? And suddenly Nomo was kind of an ace again. And I think that might be the case with with Ryu. If they can have this comfort, all they need really is maybe 12 wins from Ryu. They're not asking him to be the ace. And if you could have that number 4 starter, just imagine having a lefty in Kershaw, having a lefty in Hill, and having a lefty in Ryu, and then a righty in Maeda. I think that would be outstanding. The other question in the bullpen, Sergio Romo coming from the Giants. Now, he may spell Chris Hatcher. Chris Hatcher is out of options. I think his roster spot might be in jeopardy because you've got Jansen as the closer. So I could see Romo maybe being the 8th inning guy. So that means you need to have a bridge from the 6th inning maybe to the 8th inning. And that's where you have some of the other players like maybe a Ross Stripling come in. Or a Grant Dayton, Pedro Baez. A lot of these guys, if they still have options left, the one that doesn't have an option is a lefty, Luis Abelan. But the rest, you've got Brock Stewart, McCarthy, as I said, Adam Libator. So you've got some keys as far as there's a number 1, a number 2, possibly a number 3 if you get Ryu back. And then you've got Jansen, you've got Romo and Jansen in the bullpen. So on paper, and you always say knock on wood on paper, it looks okay. But you just don't know. You also don't know Yasiel Puig, who we joke with in the office because he's my mother's favorite player. My mother's 80 years old. She's never really had a favorite player before. Yet Puig can do no wrong. And so, you keep the porch light on for Puig and say, is this going to be the year? Because just imagine when he was a rookie, his first month in June several years ago, only Joe DiMaggio had that many hits in his first calendar month. And so suddenly you're like, whoa, Yasiel Puig and Joe DiMaggio in the same sentence. And you just wonder if it's going to come together. And I think that's really sometimes a curse, too, because with such a hot start, everybody's like, more, do it every day and everything like that. And I think, look at Ethier. He's not healthy, and I think if he can be healthy and just stay within himself, all you just need is consistency. You don't need Joe DiMaggio. You don't need Joe Hardy. You don't need, he's going to be popular regardless. They just need a solid outfielder because with that defense, he's great on defense, and I think they just want to be able to have a hitter that they can count on in the clutch, and Puig could be that guy. Look how many times other players you seemingly give up on. I can remember Eric Gagne when he wasn't going to make the team as a starter, and just his desperation, Jim Tracy made him a relief pitcher, and suddenly a star was born. Same with some other positions where you give a guy maybe just one last chance, and suddenly he blossoms. As far as a catcher, nobody ever thought A.J. Ellis would amount more than a backup, and he ended up sort of being a senior citizen on the team as far as length of service. So sometimes a guy can just get a chance, and then you can't get him out of the lineup. And so, but as I say, a fluid roster, you can't put this stuff down on paper and say this is how it's going to look, because, you know, our roster sometimes can look like a revolving door in the summertime if either people have options or they want to tweak. They're so statistically driven now in baseball ops around baseball. You see less patience, I think, because they need to have results. All the teams do. And so if a guy's slumping, you just sort of hear it like in vaudeville. Okay, next, who's next? You're not necessarily going to go with somebody if he's not doing well.
What do you hear about Jock Peterson?
Well, Jock Peterson just got engaged, and Jock Peterson, I think, is a very underrated player because look at all that power, and he kind of reminds me of a Jim Edmonds, because a left-handed power-hitting guy, he doesn't really have the spotlight on him anymore as far as a big power hitter, and he got off to he really had a slow second half 2 years ago, and last year, you know, he was pretty consistent. And I think, you know, that defense, you're really not going to find another outfielder with as good defense as him. And I think maybe now that you're married, you're settled down, 25 homers last year, and you know, the walk to strikeout ratio, 130 strikeouts to 63 walks, and there's not that much speed on the base paths, but still 25 home runs. He's just the type guy that could suddenly one little adjustment in the swing, or if he's got somebody protecting him in the lineup, you know, you could see maybe up to 35 homers, because it's just a beautiful swing.
It is a beautiful swing. Yeah.
You just hope, though, that I still can remember when he hit all those homers during the All-Star competition, and you know that's always such a curse too, because you hit 40 or 50 homers, and suddenly you come back to the stadium in the second half, and you don't necessarily bring your normal swing with you in your suitcase. So as long as he can be healthy and just same as Puig, just play his game and stay within himself and situational hitting, I think they have a chance. But I always say guarded optimism, because the one thing you can never plan on is how your competition is going to be in the league. Are the Giants going to be good? You know, are the Rockies suddenly going to rise? Sometimes, if you look back in the 1970s, the Dodgers really got lucky because, except for the Reds, there wasn't that other. It wasn't necessarily a strong division, so you could beat up on the Braves, you could beat up on the Padres, you could beat up on the Astros before they got good, and so that's the one thing you don't know: the level of competition in the National League West. But as I say, it's a fun thing to talk about in the spring. The one thing you want people to be able to do is to stay healthy. They're on the right track. They're competitive, and we'll see. There's a lot of optimism, especially with Mr. Kershaw pitching every 4 days.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Mark Landro, with all when you talk about a revolving door and all the injuries, I mean, last year they had a tremendous amount of injuries. What do you think's happening there? Is it training? Is it? I don't know what it is, but it seems like they've had a lot more injuries than several other clubs. I could be wrong, but what do you think?
I think just in general, I think if you look at the athlete, and, you know, you guys have been around, you know, Brooklyn Dodger stories, and you hear from guys and everything like that, and I really think it's kind of like, you know, if you keep inflating those tires and inflate the tires, you really don't have any wiggle room, because, you know, back in the day, the Brooklyn Dodgers, you would say they were ball players. They weren't bodybuilders. You know, Fat Freddie Simmons and some other guys were not, you know, you're not necessarily going to want to see them with their shirt off at the beach. And these guys, everything is so specialized. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me was last year I gave a tour, and in the clubhouse, you see all the weights. You see this type of exercise machine, that type, and all these different special pools and treatments and this and that. Then you have this nutrition bar. And so as I was giving the tour, people are looking at all this modern day stuff, and sort of in the corner as we were taking the tour, there was kind of like a little puff of smoke coming from the corner. And it was a former catcher who was a tri-MVP in the 1981 World Series. And he had a voice kind of like Captain Jack Sparrow. And Steve Yeager called out and said, "They're not having any fun like they did in my day." You know, it's just put on his cigarette. And not that you necessarily, want to advocate, a bad lifestyle as far as health and everything. But I do think sometimes maybe there isn't that much wiggle room, because if you have a body that's so finely tuned, and this could be for basketball, this could be for other sports,
sure.
What if you develop a muscle that you don't necessarily need for your sport, but yet if you, like an oblique or something, if
Sure.
you can still have that piano so finely tuned that suddenly there's no margin of error. And I really think sometimes that could happen. These guys are so finely tuned and they're in such great shape, but then don't forget, you've got to play not only a 162 game schedule, but spring training and warm up and everything like that. And so you're not necessarily giving your body a rest. You're not, maybe the mandatory 1 or 2 days off type thing. If you're working out every single day, you're not giving your body a chance to heal. And so, now mind you, this is coming from the guy that stunk in Little League, as far as people ask how you become a team historian. And, I say if you don't hit the ball in Little League, you're well on your way. And so, when I was a kid, I say, the hardest thing about Little League wasn't trying to catch the ball or field the ball. It was trying to get the coach to give me a schedule of the games. I had to wear my uniform every day and just sort of casually stop by to see if they were playing a game. So I give you that background because as I'm giving you all this, physical fitness theory, that's all it is. I think that's just, you could also say, hey, maybe a ball player is aggressive and you crash into that wall. And so maybe you take chances that you're not supposed to. Or you could be the most finely tuned player in the world. And what was the one pet peeve that drove Vin Scully crazy? The head first slide. So
yes,
you see a Don,
drove him crazy.
And if you break your pinky going into the base, then 99% of your body might be great. But, if that little pinky or something in your hand doesn't work, you're not going to be playing. And so I think it's a variety. I do
so
think
many
it's very
things
important.
here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't have a problem with ball players wanting to be cautious too, because just imagine all these guys maybe have these big paydays, and they're not necessarily going to want to, play hurt or risk long-term health. Like maybe you would 20 years ago if you thought somebody behind you had the job. And so it's a balancing act. You want them to be healthy, but sometimes the ball player, just through the way they play, they're just going to get hurt with a head first slide or something they probably wish they didn't do. But it's a reminder they're not robots out there. They're humans, and they've still got to take care of themselves and play the game properly.
But I'll remind you of this: when I was a kid, growing up rooting for the Brooklyn Dodgers, the core of the Dodger team, and by the core of the Dodger team, I'll say Snyder, Ferrillo, Hodges, Gilliam, Reese. Those guys, they played every day, every night, every year after year after year after year after year, all the time. They just played all the time, and I'll tell you, there was some head first slides back then too. But to look at the old Dodgers and to look at pictures of them and films of them and that, it's amazing because they all played. It was a 154 game schedule. If you look at the old yearbooks, all those guys that I just mentioned played 150 games at least every single season for a decade straight. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How they get last year the Dodgers broke the all-time record of man hours missing from the field because of injury. It's just incredible. While I have your ear, Mark Langell, let me ask you, who is scheduled to be the leadoff hitter this year for the Dodgers?
Well, the leadoff hitter, I think that's just going to be up in the air as well in terms of last year it was a revolving door, and I think it's the same thing it's the same thing this year as far as who's healthy, who's going to be pitching that day. I just don't think they have a guy committed yet. Whether it's they had tried Kike. The thing they don't have is really a base stealer, and so
no, they don't.
Not the old days of Davey Lopes or Brett Butler. I really
Maury Wills.
think they're just going. Yeah. I think it's just going to be the same as last year in terms of just sort of a guess. I don't want to say guesswork, but just I don't think they want to be. There's no prototypical leadoff hitter like a like a Wills or somebody. It's just not. We still just don't have that leadoff hitter, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
I don't think there's a Dodger fan. I don't think there's a Dodger fan around. About 20 minutes ago, you quickly mentioned Hatcher, Chris Hatcher. I don't think there's a Dodger fan in America or the world, for that matter, that wants Hatcher to be on the opening day roster. I really don't. People that
you know what's amazing? You know what's amazing though? When you look at the stats, he has one of the unique, and I think it's a footnote that people really don't know. And it's really something that's amazing when you think about it. That, let's say the pitching stats aside, he made his major league debut as a catcher with the Marlins, and then he converted to pitching. And I try to find another guy that did that to actually make the majors as a catcher and then switch to pitcher. It is amazing. But see, Jansen never made it to the majors at a different position.
Okay.
He was always a pitcher.
I'll give you that.
And so it's just more of a trivia. It's an interesting bit of trivia.
It is.
The pitching is what it is, and I think fans would concur with your opinion. But it is amazing. I would bet most fans, because who's going to be watching the Florida Marlins, 5 years ago when it's late in the season, but Chris Hatcher actually came up as a catcher and then resurfaced as a pitcher, and he's like the first guy in like 100 years to do that. And so, at least from a historical standpoint, it was interesting.
Sure,
it is interesting. But when you see Hatcher and Baez give up home runs when they come in from the bullpen, it's enough to throw your sneakers through the television screen. It just seems to happen all the time. The latest rumor I read out here in the New York press is that the Dodgers are searching for another pitcher. And one of the names that popped up was a Tampa Bay Ray, I think Cobb. His name has been bandied about that the Dodgers were interested in.
I read that too. And you and I are in the same boat, because so many times what normally happens is either a Ken Rosenthal or somebody will send it out on Twitter, and then we'll get phone calls and publicity, and then maybe we'll find out about 20 or 30 minutes later when it becomes official. And but I think what you said about searching for pitching, I think you're always going to be searching for pitching. It's just like Rich Hill.
I think so too.
It all depends too. At the end of the season, are you a seller or a buyer? Because look at what the Yankees did. They sent Chapman to the Cubs, got a bunch of prospects, and then they get Chapman back at the end of the year.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's true. You never know. It's a crazy game, and I love it every day. I love it.
Hey, Ron, I want to ask you about the statue, because we're all looking forward to the statue, and I hate it when people treat number 42 as a cliche, and they look at the jersey and it's kind of a piece of fashion and everything like that. And I remind people that Jackie was a real person, and this isn't just some movie character or anything like that. There was actually a person named Jackie Robinson, and I just wonder, from your point of view, what do you think of what do you think of him having a statue at the stadium? What would you want a visitor to Dodger Stadium to know about Jackie Robinson, since you knew Jackie Robinson as a kid?
Right. Well, I think that, first of all, having that statue is a great honor for him. And when you think of the Dodgers, you think of Jackie Robinson. I mean, there were so many other people Dodgers, Duke Snyder, people, you could go through and through. But Jackie Robinson lit the light, and he broke the door. And when I go around and I speak a lot, public speaking, to organizations and schools and people don't realize what a tremendous man he was, a human being off the field, and what he did. A lot of people, he was a baseball player and this and that, but he was so much more than that. They say that Babe Ruth changed baseball. Jackie Robinson changed America, and he did it alone. And that's the thing. He was alone. There was no one else there. And I was out in L.A. About a year ago, Mark, and Larry King interviewed me. And he was telling me a story that the first time he interviewed Martin Luther King, he introduced him as the founder of the Civil Rights Movement. And Martin Luther King stopped him and he said, Larry, I have to correct you. I'm not the founder. Jackie Robinson was. And it's the truth. And I mean, what he did after his days in baseball, how he helped people and worked so hard for civil rights and African Americans in general. Just a tremendous, tremendous human being. And he was a real hero. He never smoked. He never drank. He never took drugs. And he never refused to sign a kid's autograph. I mean, he was just the cat's meow in my eyes. And I'm so honored to see that they're going to be having a statute for him, and the continual recognition of Jackie Robinson is so important to me. I mean, the Ken Burns thing that just came out, and that was more than just Jackie Robinson. It was so much more in there, about flag burning, and it was about burning churches down in the South, and so many things that I think people learned that possibly they didn't know. So there's so much education to be learned about Jackie Robinson. And that's something I've been doing for all my life, and I continue to do it. He was just an amazing man and a tremendous friend and a wonderful human being.
Well, when you tell those stories and show those letters, and I show that stuff at the stadium, and I always want to defer to people that knew him in terms of it's one thing for me to spout statistics and everything like that, but those firsthand experiences are so valuable, and I just so appreciate what you do because I'm 51 at the stadium, and it's tough when people start to call you Mister. These kids, and you ask what year they were born, and they tell you, and then you tell them how the team did on the day they were born. So, but you still have to remind people, hey, 42 is not, this isn't just Fashion Week, and we all got to wear 42. No. You try to remind people what this means and what you said about the flag burning and everything like that. If you don't hear these things, you'd have no clue.
You would have no.
And I have to be honest, I didn't grow up with that. I grew up in South Pasadena. Pasadena sort of sanitized the version of, they heroically talk about Jackie Robinson, but they don't necessarily say how they made his life miserable for his first 30 years.
Right.
So, they sort of take the credit that he's there, but they don't really, talk about the public pool that he wasn't allowed in and his brother Max sweeping the streets and everything like that. So I think it's so important, and I'm sure, Peter, you would agree, to have these dialogues and just to let people know what happened back then and have meaning behind these people, not just show their stats, but just remind people what everybody went through.
It's very important. And when I have discussions in my own family at barbecues with my grandsons and stuff, and they'll ask me questions about, the Brooklyn days and stuff, and they say, Gramps, tell us about Jackie Robinson. So what I would tell them, I came up with something off the top of my head a couple of summers ago, and I saw in their eyes they finally understood what I was talking about, because I tried to think of someone that they could relate to, and then I could tell them how Jackie was. And I said, look, if you want to know what kind of a ball player Jackie Robinson was, do you remember when Ricky Henderson was in his prime? And they go, yeah. And I go, remember how he would take over a ball game? He would just take over the game. Defensively, offensively, on the bases, just take over the game. He'd walk, he'd steal second, he'd steal third. I mean, the guy just dominated the game. Think about that. And that's what Jackie Robinson did as the first black guy ever being called all these names, and he was doing that day after day after day after day. And then I see the realization in their eyeballs. They finally get it because it's not some ghost you're talking about. They can relate to what you're trying to say. And yes, it is extremely important to keep that alive and to keep people realizing what Jackie went through and what he means to America. And forget the Dodgers. Baseball, the whole game of baseball itself, America as a country. I mean, there is no overstating when it comes to Jack Roosevelt Robinson. There's no embellishing. You don't need to embellish with Jackie Robinson. I mean, the facts are there, and the facts are there, and anybody who wants to listen, you tell them about it, and believe me, I haven't traveled around like Ron Rabinovitz speaking to Larry King or anything, but I do my share. Believe me, I talk to a lot of folks and have throughout my 70 years, and I don't let them forget that stuff. That stuff is very important to the youngsters. They need the education. They need the background. They need to understand.
Absolutely.
You can't just tell them, oh, Jackie Robinson. They go, oh, yeah, I know that guy. He played for the Dodgers. He wore number 42. And that's all they know, So it's important that you got to educate and you got to tell, not to be didactic or to be imperious or to, look down upon people, talk down to people. Just have to tell them what actually happened. And it's incredible. I don't know how you guys felt about the movie 42. I thought it was done very well. It had a few blurbs in it, a little hiccup here and there, but I thought it was done very, very well, and I think they did a good job on it. The story of Jackie Robinson is an important one. It should be continued to be told by everyone who knows the facts about it, and that usually people that are older than you, Mark Langio, you're only 51. I have sneakers older than you, but it's important. It's important that people learn and know about stuff like this because be sure when I tell you they take a lot for granted. People take a lot for granted. They just they just want to. Well, how many home runs did he hit? Well, he never hit 20 home runs. What the hell? He never did this. He never did that. Well, you don't understand. Let me explain it to you. Grab another beer, grab another soda, whatever, grab another hot dog, sit down over here. I'll tell you a few stories. And this is the way it goes. And, you tell two or three people, they tell two or three people, and it goes on and on and on and on. And that's the way it's got to be done. I mean, it's sad that people forget these things, and it's also sad that people my age, as Casey Stengel used to say, at the present time, people my age at the present time are dead. But that's the way it is, and life marches on. But you got to tell people all about these stories. These stories. This is what we do the podcast for. We do the podcast. It's called Tale of Two Cities, okay? And we talk about Brooklyn. We talk about Leo DeRocher and all of those characters from back then, and then we also talk about Lasorda, and we talk about Walter Olson going out to L.A., and we talk about when Drysdale and Koufax went out to L.A., and Snyder and Hodges went out to L.A., and Labine and Erskine went out to L.A., and Roebuck went out to L.A. with Zimmer and all that stuff. We talk about that too, and it made me smile. It made me smile in a good way. It made me smile when you said, when I saw number 6 on Charlie Culberson, and I said, come on, that's Garvey's number, do something. I was watching the same at-bat. And I'm saying, hey, man, that's Paul Perillo, man. You got to do something with that number. Do something with it, please. Hit a line drive somewhere. come on, and square up on something here. And it's really funny because, I don't think there's anyone who loves Vin Scully more than I do. I mean, I'm sure there are millions of people that love him as much as I do, but I don't think there's a person that can love him more than I do. And I was watching a game maybe 5 years ago, and they had the picture of a Dodger on deck, and I'm not sure who was wearing 14 back then. I don't think Kike was with them yet, but one of the Dodgers had number 14 on, and the camera was on him, and Scully said, it's hard to look at that Dodger uniform there with that number 14 and not think of Mike Scioscia. And I almost dropped off the couch onto the floor, and I'm yelling at the TV screen, Gil Hodges, not Mike Scioscia, Gil Hodges, number 14. Come on, Vince. And, these are the stories that cannot be lost. These are the stories that must continue to be told and told and retold and told again and again and again. And that's, that's why we have this podcast.
And what's
Ron,
great here
take over. I talked too much. I'm sorry I went off on a tangent.
No, not at all. I was going to say, we all live in the same Dodger universe. You're from the planet Brooklyn. I'm from the planet L.A. And we think the exact same way because it's just a matter of what's in front of us, but we know what's important to us at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm from planet Minneapolis. See? We're all connected. Oh, it's so great.
Yeah, which means Planet LA beat you in 7 games in 65.
Yes,
that's right. And I was cheering for
1965
Planet
beat
LA.
the Twins.
That's right. I was planning. I was cheering for Planet LA. Always.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. My idea of genealogy, you know how they have Louis Gates and trace your roots? I was born opening day 1965, and it drives my family crazy because my idea of tracing my roots is thinking that at 6:59 I was a national anthem baby, but it turned out the game started at 8, so I was a batting practice baby. And they look at me and like, that's your idea of family heritage?
I love it. That's so great.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It is so fun.
I love it.
It's so
great
fun.
Story.
Oh, it really
Well,
is.
I want to thank both of you. I want to thank both of you gentlemen for joining me. Ron, as always, and Mark, you're certainly invited back. If this wasn't too much of a drag for you, you're invited back time and time again. Whenever you want to come back, just let Ron know, and we will have you back in a heartbeat. Before you can say Jackie Robinson, we'll have you back as guest.
And by the way, I just heard that line from the 1950 Bob Hope show when Jackie went on with Joe Page. So you see, you're going to say something, and it just suddenly there's another flashback. So that's why I enjoyed it so much, Peter and Ron. Thank you so much for having me on. I truly enjoyed it.
Mark,
we loved having you on. We loved it. It was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah.
There's just, I feel bad because I don't want to run over, but I have like at least a dozen or 15 more questions to ask you, but perhaps that will be for the next time you come on. And I want to thank both of you gentlemen and wrap this show up and say goodnight to our listening friends. And this has been Comfortably Zoned Radio, and you listen to Dodgers Baseball, A Tale of Two Cities, from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. Thank you again, gentlemen, and good night.